Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in your life when you realize that the battle you've been fighting isn't really with people. It's within yourself. It's in the way your heart reacts, the way your mind holds on, the way your spirit gets shaken by things that were never meant to have power over you. You see, we've been taught to respond, to defend, to prove, to protect our pride at all costs. But nobody told us how expensive that anger would be, how it would steal our peace, interrupt our growth, and keep us emotionally tied to people who were never assigned to carry our destiny. I came here today to speak to the part of you that is tired of being triggered, the part of you that's exhausted from replaying conversations, overthinking disrespect, and carrying the weight of things you should have released a long time ago. Because the truth is, not everything deserves your reaction, and not everyone deserves access to your emotions. There is a higher level of living, a deeper kind of strength, where peace becomes your power, where you don't have to raise your voice to be heard, and you don't have to fight every battle to win. It's the kind of life where your calm becomes your crown and your silence speaks louder than your anger ever could. So today we're not just talking about avoiding anger. We're talking about transforming the way you show up in the world. We're talking about becoming so grounded, so unshaken, that no opinion, no insult, no negativity can pull you out of your purpose. Because when you master your emotions, you take your power back. Not everything deserves your reaction. And that truth alone has the power to transform the way you move through life. Because most of the exhaustion you feel isn't coming from what people are doing. It's coming from how often you feel the need to respond to it. Every comment, every look, every bit of negativity pulls at your attention like it's entitled to your energy. And somewhere along the way, you started believing that staying silent meant weakness, that not reacting meant you were losing. But what if the real loss is how much of yourself you give away, just trying to prove something to people who were never worth the proof in the first place? You don't have to answer everything. You don't have to correct every misunderstanding. You don't have to show up to every argument you're invited to. Some people speak from their own pain, their own insecurity, their own limited understanding. And if you respond to them at that same level, you step into a space that was never meant for you. You shrink yourself to meet their noise, and in doing that, you lose your alignment with peace. There is a difference between having a voice and feeling the need to use it every time you're provoked. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes strength is walking away with your dignity still intact. Sometimes strength is choosing not to let someone else's chaos become your burden. Because the moment you react impulsively, you give control of your emotions to something outside of you. And once that happens, you are no longer moving with intention. You are moving on impulse. Think about how many times you've replayed a moment in your head, wishing you had said something different, wishing you had stayed calm instead of letting anger take over. That feeling doesn't come from silence. It comes from reacting without awareness. It comes from allowing temporary emotions to create permanent consequences. And the more you practice reacting to everything, the more you train your mind to stay in a constant state of defense, as if the world is always attacking you. But the truth is, everything is not an attack. Everything is not a threat. And everything certainly does not require your response. Some things are simply distractions designed to pull you away from your focus and drain your energy. And if you don't learn how to filter what deserves your attention, you will spend your life responding to things that were never meant to matter. You have to start asking yourself a different question. Not what should I say, but is this worth my peace? Because peace is not something you find by accident. It is something you protect with intention. And every time you react unnecessarily, you chip away at that peace. You allow outside noise to dictate your inner state. You hand over your calm to people and situations that will never return it. There is power in pause. There is wisdom in taking a step back and allowing yourself to breathe before you respond. Because in that pause, you create space for clarity. You give yourself the chance to choose your response instead of being controlled by your reaction. And that choice is where your power lives. Not in proving someone wrong, not in defending your ego, but in maintaining your composure when everything around you is trying to disrupt it. Some people will misunderstand you because you choose not to engage. They will assume you have nothing to say or that you don't have the courage to stand up for yourself. But what they don't realize is that your silence is not empty. It is intentional. It is a decision to rise above the noise instead of getting lost in it. It is a form of discipline that protects your energy and keeps you focused on what truly matters. You are not here to win every argument. You are not here to respond to every opinion. You are not here to carry the weight of every negative word that comes your way. You are here to grow, to evolve, to build a life that is rooted in purpose and peace. And that kind of life requires you to be selective with your energy, because at the end of the day, your reaction is a currency. Every time you give it away, you are investing a part of yourself into something. And if you keep investing in negativity, in conflict, in unnecessary drama, you will find yourself emotionally bankrupt, drained from giving so much of your attention to things that never deserved it. So you have to become more intentional, more aware, more disciplined in how you respond to the world around you. Not everything deserves your reaction, and once you truly understand that, you begin to move differently. You begin to carry yourself with a calm that cannot be easily shaken, a presence that does not need to prove itself, a strength that is not defined by how loud you can be, but by how grounded you choose to remain. Control your mind before it controls you. Because whether you realize it or not, your mind is always speaking, it is always interpreting, always reacting, always creating meaning out of every situation you encounter. And if you are not intentional about guiding it, it will guide you into overthinking, into anger, into stress, into emotional chaos that feels impossible to escape. The mind is powerful, but it is also undisciplined by default. And without awareness, it will run in directions that do not serve your peace. You wake up, and before the world even touches you, your mind has already started working. It reminds you of what went wrong yesterday. It replays conversations. It anticipates problems that haven't even happened yet. And before you know it, your mood is already shaped by thoughts you didn't consciously choose. That is what happens when the mind is left unchecked. It doesn't ask for permission. It takes control. Most people believe their emotions are caused by what happens around them. But the truth is, emotions are created by the thoughts you allow to grow within you. Two people can experience the same situation and walk away with completely different emotional outcomes. Why? Because one allowed their mind to spiral while the other chose to stay grounded. The difference is not the situation. It is the level of control over the mind. If you don't train your mind, it will train you to react. It will teach you to assume the worst, to take things personally, to hold on to anger longer than necessary. It will convince you that every negative thought is true, that every impulse must be acted on, that every emotion deserves to be expressed immediately. And when you live like that, you become a prisoner of your own internal world, constantly pulled in different directions by thoughts that were never meant to define you. There is a discipline in observing your thoughts without becoming them. Just because a thought appears in your mind does not mean it deserves your belief. Just because you feel anger rising does not mean you have to express it. There is a space between what you think and how you act. And in that space lies your power. But most people never pause long enough to access it. They move instantly from thought to reaction, never questioning whether that thought is helpful, true, or even necessary. Control begins with awareness. It begins with noticing the patterns in your thinking. Do you assume the worst about people? Do you replay negative moments over and over again? Do you let one small inconvenience ruin your entire day? These are not just habits. They are signs that your mind is leading you instead of you leading it. And until you become aware of these patterns, you will continue to be influenced by them without even realizing it. Training your mind is not about forcing yourself to think positively all the time. It is about learning how to redirect your focus. When a negative thought appears, you acknowledge it, but you don't feed it. You don't let it grow into a story that consumes your energy. You gently shift your attention to something that serves you better. This is not easy, and it does not happen overnight. but it is necessary if you want to experience peace that is not dependent on external circumstances. There will be moments when your mind tries to pull you into anger. Someone says something disrespectful, and instantly your thought, and start building a case. They remind you of every similar situation, every past hurt, every reason why you should respond with intensity. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can let those thoughts take over, or you can step back and recognize that they are just thoughts, not commands. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. And the moment you understand that, you begin to separate yourself from the emotional storms they create. You begin to realize that you can feel anger without acting on it, that you can experience frustration without letting it define your behavior. That is what it means to have control, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to choose how you respond to it. A controlled mind does not react to everything it encounters. It filters, it processes, it decides. It understands that not every situation deserves emotional investment. It recognizes that peace is more valuable than being right, that clarity is more powerful than impulsive expression. And because of that, it moves with intention instead of urgency. When you learn to control your mind, you stop being easily disturbed by the outside world. People can say what they want. Situations can unfold in unexpected ways, but you remain steady because your inner state is not dependent on external triggers. You become less reactive, more thoughtful, more grounded in who you are rather than what is happening around you. This kind of control changes everything. It changes how you communicate, how you handle conflict, how you process challenges. It allows you to respond instead of react, to think clearly instead of emotionally, to maintain your peace even when circumstances are trying to take it away. And once you experience that level of stability, you realize how much of your past stress was not caused by life itself, but by the way your mind interpreted it detached from P. People, protect your peace, because not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay, and not everyone deserves a permanent place in your emotional world. Yet so often you find yourself holding on to opinions, holding on to expectations, holding on to the need for validation from people who are inconsistent, unavailable, or simply not aligned with who you are becoming. And in that attachment, you slowly begin to lose yourself. Detachment is not about becoming cold or distant. It is not about shutting down your heart or pretending you don't care. It is about caring wisely. It is about understanding that your peace should never be dependent on someone else's behavior. Because the moment your emotional stability is tied to how someone treats you, responds to you, or acknowledges you, you give them a level of control they were never meant to have. There is a difference between connection and attachment. Connection allows you to experience relationships fully while still remaining grounded in yourself. Attachment, on the other hand, creates dependency. It makes you feel like your happiness, your worth, your sense of calm is somehow linked to another person's presence or approval. And when that person disappoints you, as people inevitably do, it doesn't just hurt, it disrupts your entire emotional state. You have to learn how to be present with people without becoming consumed by them. You can love someone and still not allow their actions to disturb your peace. You can care about someone and still recognize when their energy is not healthy for you. Detachment is the ability to draw that line, to say, I value you, but I value my peace more, and to stand firm in that decision without guilt. Some people will only show up in your life to test your boundaries. They will say things that trigger you, behave in ways that frustrate you, and create situations that shall lend your patience. And if you are not careful, you will get pulled into their patterns. You will start reacting, over-explaining, trying to fix things that were never yours to fix. But detachment reminds you that you don't have to participate in every dynamic that is presented to you. It is okay to step back. It is okay to create distance. It is okay to stop engaging in conversations that drain you, in relationships that confuse you, in situations that constantly disturb your inner peace. You are not obligated to carry the emotional weight of others. especially when it begins to feel like a burden rather than a connection. One of the hardest parts of detachment is letting go of the idea that you can control how others perceive you. You want to be understood. You want to be respected. You want people to see your intentions clearly. But the truth is, not everyone will. Some people will misunderstand you no matter how clearly you communicate. Some will project their own insecurities onto you. And if you keep trying to change their perception, you will exhaust yourself in a battle that has no real resolution. Detachment teaches you to release that need, to accept that you cannot control how others think or feel, but you can control how much access they have to your energy. You can decide whether their words stay with you or pass through you. You can choose whether their behavior defines your mood or simply becomes something you observe. Without internalizing, protecting your peace requires boundaries, and boundaries require courage. It takes courage to say no when you are used to saying yes. It takes courage to walk away when you are used to staying. It takes courage to prioritize your well-being in a world that often expects you to prioritize others at your own expense. But without those boundaries, detachment is impossible. And without detachment, peace is fragile. You are allowed to outgrow people. You are allowed to change your priorities, to shift your focus, to move in a direction that no longer includes certain relationships. This does not make you selfish. It makes you aware. It shows that you are no longer willing to compromise your inner stability for the sake of external connection. There will be moments when detachment feels uncomfortable, when you question whether you are doing the right thing, when you feel the pull to go back to old patterns just because they are familiar. But growth often feels unfamiliar at first. Choosing peace over attachment is not always easy, but it is always necessary if you want to live a life that is not constantly shaken by the actions of others. When you begin to detach, you notice a shift within yourself. You become less reactive, less affected by things that once disturbed you. You start to see people more clearly without the filter of emotional dependency. You stop expecting them to fulfill roles they were never meant to play in your life. And in that clarity, you find a sense of freedom. A freedom that comes from knowing that your peace is yours to protect, not something that can be taken from you by anyone who chooses to act out of alignment with it. Stop taking things personally, because not everything that happens around you is about you, even though it may feel that way in the moment. Someone's tone, someone's behavior, someone's lack of response. It's easy to internalize these things and turn them into a reflection of your worth. But the truth is, people are often responding to their own inner world, their own stress, their own unresolved emotions, and not to you as deeply as you think. When you take things personally, you give meaning to situations that may not have been intended in the first place. A delayed reply becomes rejection. A short response becomes disrespect. A difference in opinion becomes a personal attack. And before you know it, your mind has created a story that fuels your emotions, even though the reality may be completely different. This habit doesn't just affect how you see others, it distorts how you see yourself. You begin to question your value based on how others treat you. You start adjusting your behavior to avoid imagined rejection. You carry the weight of assumptions that were never confirmed. And all of this creates an emotional instability that could have been avoided if you had simply paused and recognized that not everything is meant to be taken to heart. People have their own battles that you cannot see. They carry stress from their work, their relationships, their past experiences. Sometimes they are distracted. Sometimes they are overwhelmed. Sometimes they are dealing with things that have nothing to do with you. But when you take their actions personally, you absorb that energy as if it were directed at you, and in doing so, you make yourself responsible for something that was never yours to carry. There's a level of freedom that comes when you stop assuming everything is about you. You begin to observe instead of internalize. You allow people to have their moments without turning those moments into judgments about your own worth. You create space between what happens externally and how you feel internally. And in that space, you regain control over your emotional state, taking things personally often comes from a deeper need for validation. You want to feel seen, respected, valued, and when someone's behavior doesn't align with that, it feels like a direct hit. But relying on others to consistently validate you is a fragile way to live because people are unpredictable. Their moods change, their priorities shift, their attention moves in different directions. If your sense of self is tied to their behavior, will constantly feel unsettled. You have to build a sense of worth that is not dependent on how others respond to you, a sense of self that remains stable regardless of external reactions. When you know who you are, when you are grounded in your own value, you don't feel the need to interpret every action as a reflection of you. You understand that people can act a certain way without it having anything to do with your identity. There will be moments when someone says something that feels personal, something that seems intentionally hurtful. And even in those moments, you have a choice. You can absorb it, carry it, let it affect how you see yourself. Or you can recognize that their words are a reflection of their perspective, not a definition of your reality. This doesn't mean you ignore disrespect or allow others to treat you poorly. It means you don't let their behavior define your internal state. When you stop taking things personally, you become less reactive. You don't jump to conclusions. You don't immediately defend yourself. You don't let your emotions escalate based on assumptions. Instead, you stay grounded. You assess situations with clarity rather than emotion. You respond with intention instead of impulse. It also improves your relationships. When you are not constantly interpreting actions as personal attacks, you communicate more openly. You ask questions instead of making assumptions. You give people the benefit of the doubt instead of immediately assuming the worst. And this creates a healthier dynamic, one that is based on understanding rather than reaction. This shift requires awareness. It requires you to catch yourself in the moment when you start to internalize something unnecessarily, to pause and ask, is this really about me or am I making it about me? That simple question can change everything because it interrupts the automatic pattern of taking things personally and replaces it with conscious thought over time. This practice becomes natural. You begin to move through situations with a sense of ease, no longer weighed down by every small interaction. You become more emotionally stable, more focused, more at peace with yourself. You stop carrying things that were never meant to be carried, and in doing so, you create space for a lighter, more balanced way of living. Master silence over arguments, because not every disagreement deserves your voice, and not every moment requires you to prove a point. There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself, a kind of confidence that does not feel the need to respond to every challenge. Yet so often, you find yourself pulled into conversations that drain you, arguments that go in circles, situations where no matter what you say, the outcome remains the same. You start with the intention to explain, to clarify, to be understood. But somewhere along the way, the conversation shifts. It becomes less about truth and more about ego, less about resolution and more about winning. And in that shift, you lose sight of what really matters. You raise your voice. You repeat yourself, you invest more energy, hoping that if you just say it the right way, the other person will finally see your perspective. But not everyone is listening to understand. Some people are listening to respond, to defend, to protect their own viewpoint at all costs. And when you engage with someone who is not open, no amount of explaining will create clarity. You can speak with logic, with emotion, with honesty, and still be misunderstood. That is the moment where silence becomes more powerful than any argument you could make. Silence is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is a conscious decision to step out of a dynamic that no longer serves you. It is recognizing that your peace is more valuable than being right. Because being right in the middle of chaos still leaves you in chaos. And if the cost of proving your point is your calm, then the price is too high. Arguments often escalate because both sides feel unheard. Each person is focused on expressing themselves rather than receiving what the other is saying. And as the tension builds, the conversation becomes louder, sharper, more emotionally charged. In those moments, silence interrupts the pattern. It removes the fuel that keeps the argument alive. It creates a pause where intensity once existed. Choosing silence does not mean you have nothing to say. It means you have decided that saying it is not necessary. It means you understand that not every situation requires your input, that not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected immediately. Some things resolve themselves when you stop feeding them with attention. There is also a discipline in knowing when to walk away. Not every conversation deserves your presence. Not every person deserves your explanation. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Because when you withdraw your energy, you take back control. You refuse to be pulled into emotional exchanges that leave you feeling drained and unsettled. Silence protects you from saying things you might regret. In the heat of the moment, emotions run high and words come out quickly. Words that can hurt, words that can damage relationships, words that cannot be taken back. But when you choose silence, you give yourself time to process, time to reflect, time to respond in a way that aligns with who you truly are, rather than how you feel in that moment. There is a calm that comes with mastering silence, a steady presence that is not easily shaken by external noise. When you no longer feel the need to engage in every argument, you begin to conserve your energy. You use your voice with intention rather than impulse. And because of that, when you do choose to speak, your words carry more weight. People may not always understand your silence. They may interpret it as indifference, as agreement, or even as weakness. But their interpretation does not change your intention. You are not silent because you are unable to respond. You are silent because you have chosen not to. And that choice is a reflection of your self-control, not your lack of strength. There will always be opportunities to argue, to defend, to engage in unnecessary conflict. The world is full of opinions, disagreements, and perspectives that challenge your own. But you do not have to participate in all of them. You can listen without reacting. You can observe without engaging. You can observe without engaging. You can stand firm in your truth without feeling the need to convince others of it. Mastering silence is about understanding the value of your energy. It is about recognizing that every argument you enter is an investment, and not all investments are worth making. Some only lead to frustration, to wasted time, to emotional exhaustion. To wasted time, to emotional exhaustion. And when you begin to see that clearly, you become more selective with where you place your attention. You start to choose peace over noise, clarity over chaos, intention over reaction, intention over reaction. You begin to realize that not everything needs to be said. Not every point needs to be proven. Not every disagreement needs to be proven. Not every disagreement needs to be resolved through words. And in that realization, you discover a different kind of power, one that does not rely on volume, but on restraint, one that does not seek validation, but remains grounded regardless of what is happening around you. Respond with power, not emotion, because there is a difference between reacting in the moment and responding with intention. Most of the time, what you call a response is actually a reaction. Quick, impulsive, driven by whatever emotion is strongest at that exact second. Anger rises, frustration builds, and before you even realize it, you said something or done something that doesn't reflect who you truly are. That is what happens when emotion takes control. It moves faster than your awareness, louder than your logic, and stronger than your discipline if you have not trained yourself to pause. Power is not found in how intensely you react. It is found in how well you can stay grounded when everything around you is trying to pull you out of your center. Anyone can react. Anyone can raise their voice, defend their ego, or let their emotions spill into their actions. But not everyone can pause, process, and choose a response that aligns with their values rather than their feelings in the moment. There is a space between what happens to you and how you respond to it. In that space lies your power. But most people never access it because they move too quickly. They feel something and they immediately act on it. They don't question it. They don't examine it. They don't give themselves time to understand it. And because of that, they become predictable. Easy to trigger, easy to provoke, easy to control when you respond with emotion. You are giving the situation control over you. You are allowing external circumstances to dictate your internal state. And once that happens, you are no longer leading yourself. You are being led by whatever is happening around you. That is not power. That is dependence on circumstances that you cannot always control. Responding with power requires awareness. It requires you to recognize what you are feeling without immediately acting on it. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of emotion instead of trying to release it instantly through words or actions. This is not easy, especially when you are used to reacting. But it is necessary if you want to move the rough life with stability instead of constant emotional fluctuation. There will be moments when someone disrespects you, when a situation feels unfair, when frustration builds quickly. In those moments, your instinct will be to respond immediately, to defend yourself, to express your anger, to make sure your voice is heard. But power asks something different from you. It asks you to pause, to breathe, to step back and assess what is actually happening before you decide how to engage with it. Not every emotion needs to be expressed in the moment it is felt. Some emotions need to be understood first. Anger, for example, is often a surface emotion. Beneath it, there may be disappointment, hurt, or unmet expectations. But when you react immediately, you only express the surface. You don't give yourself the opportunity to understand what is truly driving your feelings, and because of that, your response lacks depth and clarity. A powerful response is intentional. It is measured. It is aligned with who you are, not just how you feel. It considers the outcome, the impact, the long-term effect of your words and actions. It is not about suppressing emotion, but about channeling it in a way that serves you rather than harms you. When you begin to respond